Good morning. Welcome to today's show. My name is Valerie Leonard. I am the founder of nonprofit Utopia, and we are an organization that focuses on building capacity for emerging leaders to start their organization, scale their organization. Okay, bear with me. Okay. I do apologize. I had the YouTube channel on. My name is Valerie Leonard. I'm the founder of nonprofit Utopia. We're the ideal community for organizations that want to either start, right, or scale their own organizations, right? And today we're going to focus on assessing our organizations. And, sometimes when we talk about assessment, we think of assessment as being expensive. We think about needing, professionals to come in. But the truth of the matter is, an assessment can be just as simple as a group of folks getting together, say, you know what, we need to do this better, we need to do that better, etc. But what we're going to talk about is a more comprehensive approach where you are looking at your organization from the top down, and then you're taking those results, so to speak, and you're developing a plan of action. And we believe that that is probably the way to go. All right. So without further ado, I am going to share my screen and then we will go into it. All right. All right. So, what is capacity building? Capacity building is basically making sure that you have systems in place that will help your organization to be more impactful, right? So many times we're focusing on the programs and trying to get that halo effect. But as you know, there's a whole lot of stuff that goes on beneath the surface to make sure that we can get that halo effect, right? So we need to have fundraising in place, right? We need to have people, the right people in the right job. So we want to make sure that all of the stuff that you really can't see upfront is working so that we can make a better impact and so that we can grow. And the reason why capacity building is so important, first and foremost, it lays the groundwork, for you to build upon and grow and stay in place for a long, long time. It helps to institutionalize the knowledge so that when person XYZ leaves, the knowledge that that person has stays with the organization. So if you have the right systems in place, you won't fall apart when one person leaves. It also helps you to better manage your organization, right? It gives you a blueprint. It helps you to look at your organization from the top down, see what's strong, see what is, kind of mediocre, and what really, really needs help. And if you use these tools correctly, you can actually use them to grow for the long term. You can have what we call a focused intervention where we're just focusing on one aspect of capacity building. So, for example, if you feel like, the biggest thing that's holding you back is your ability to hire good people, then you might at one time just focus on staff training, hiring the right people, putting systems in place for performance management so that you can align their performance with strategy and all of that stuff. Or you could do a developmental intervention, and that is you're looking at your organization holistically. You're not just looking at one thing, but you're looking at things like, how does the board function? How skilled is our staff? Do we have the proper financial systems in place? Are we tracking outcomes? Do we even have a system to track outcomes? We know that we're doing well, right? But how do we prove it? So, when you want to look holistically, you want to do a developmental intervention. And there are a number of people who care about this stuff, right? We may not necessarily articulate it, but we really, really do care. Your board members care about capacity building. Why do they care? Because ultimately, everything that goes on with the organization stops with the board. Everything rises and falls on leadership. And then, from a legal perspective, board members are legally liable for everything that goes on. Staff cares because, staff is the one that's making everything happen. You want to create a situation, you want to create a culture for your staff where, one, they have the tools that they need to get the job done, but they also want to be in a position where they're not overworked. They also want to be in a position where their work is appreciated, there's strong flow, there is a pathway for promotion. And even in those cases where there's not a pathway for promotion, you want to make sure that there's systems in place where the work is rewarded, they can be continually developed. Funders care, right? Because they're investing in you. They want to make sure that the money that they're investing in you is well managed. They also want to make sure not only that is it well managed, but it's actually making an impact. Just because you're busy does not mean that you're making an impact. Your partners care because they want to know who they're dealing with. In the most successful partnerships I worked with, they started off with an organizational assessment. They had people who were 100-year organizations, heads of 100-year organizations, multi-million-dollar organizations, and just startups and things somewhere in between. The very first thing that they did was have everybody to do an assessment and then share those assessments out. So they were intimately familiar with one another's strong points, their weaknesses, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and they were able to actually solidify their working relationship as a result, as a direct result of going through that assessment process. The community cares, right? There are people, even if they're not working with you, they might just live in a community. They want to know what's happening with the organizations that are in their community, right? They want to make sure that the people who are serving the people in their community have the capacity to do the right thing, not only do the right thing with the money, so to speak. They want to make sure that they're good stewards, and an assessment will help them to understand whether or not you're doing that. But they also have a vested interest in making sure that the people you're working with actually benefit. So you can use your assessments for a number of things. One common thing that you might want to use your assessment for is a SWOT analysis. That's where you're looking at your strengths, your weaknesses. So that's all internal to the organization. And then you're looking at opportunities in the environment, and you're looking at some of the things that could keep you from meeting your goals and objectives. Those are threats. So you start off with an assessment, and that will help you to develop the strength and weaknesses part of that SWOT analysis. You also should use an assessment when you're doing a strategic planning process, right? A strategic planning process helps the organization to position itself for the long term changes in the environment. But you can't really do that quite as well if you don't know, what your strengths and weaknesses are. You can't really respond to the changes if you don't know your limitations, if you don't know the areas that you need to strengthen. All right. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing. That's why you need to get more knowledge, and the assessment will help you to get there, right? The assessment will also help you to improve your operations. And I know we don't like to talk about operations, the things like the legal, the real estate, the HR, and all of those things that support your programming. That stuff is not really sexy, but it takes all of those things, right, in order for you to generate that halo effect from making change in the lives of the people that you serve. And then finally, You want to use your assessments for performance management. So, what is performance management? It's looking at one, how well your employees are doing, right? Are they performing well? Are they not performing well? Do they have the skills that they need in order for the organization to meet its goals and objectives? How are you measuring that performance? When you look at your programs, performance management is looking at the goals and objectives that you have and the outcomes, right? What outcomes did you set out to achieve? And the performance management system will help you to get there. When it comes to looking at organizational efficiency, performance management will help you to understand key performance indicators like your finances, right? How much money is coming in, how much money is going out, what's your return on investment, how long do you keep money on hand, what's your cash flow position like. So, all of those things can come together to help you put together a nice performance management system. So when we look at the types of things you should be assessing, this is not the entire list, but this is a very generalized list. And you should know that these are some of the most common things that your funders are looking for. So I always try to make sure I understand what the funder is looking for and then help people in our community to make sure that whatever they're doing is in alignment with what the funders are looking for. So, one of the first things that a funder is going to look for in terms of your capacity is, what does your board team look like? What are the practices? What is the leadership like? Um, and I'm going to let that phone ring right about now. Can't reach it, and I'm not going to go and answer it. But they really do care about, who's minding the store. They also are interested in your financial management practices. Do you have separation of duties between all the people or among all the people who are actually managing your funds, making sure that there's no one person who's in control of all the finances? Because again, they want to make sure that when they give you funds, that there is good financial management and sound stewardship. Um, you want to also assess your fundraising capabilities. You want to look at whether or not you've been able to achieve your goals. You want to look at the types of systems that you have in place to actually communicate with donors, to manage your impact with donors, manage your return on investment with donors, tracking them and keeping in touch with them over time. You want to look at your human resources. You want to know that your staff is very well skilled and well able to manage the programs and do the functions that they were hired to do. To the extent that there are gaps that you identify during this process, you want to make sure that you train them, that you hire the right people. You want to look at your impact. Do you have systems in place that can measure whether or not your programs have the desired impact? Are your programs actually making changes for the people that you're serving? Do you have systems in place for that? Are there automated systems? Can you share those data out with your partners? When we look at your programs, we're looking at a system of, goals and objectives and resources and looking at the changes that you're making for your clients in your community. Do you have systems in place for that? Are you engaging in practices that are considered best practices that your funders are familiar with? Are you well networked? Do you partner with other organizations in the community? Are your partners able to help you to fill in some of the gaps where you might not be quite as strong? Are you able to fill in the gaps for others where they're not as strong? When we look at your readiness to pursue funding, are you in fact ready? In some cases, that will mean having all of these systems in place, right? at a very basic level. In some instances, it will mean, you've gone through the process of registering with sam.gov and all of those systems that they need you to put in place at the federal level as well as at the state level. Have you registered and pre registered so that when opportunities come up, all you have to do is fill out forms, right? And then program evaluation. Are your programs working? Do you have systems in place to prove that they're working? Are you tracking outcomes? How are you using your evaluation outcomes? Are you using them for marketing tools? Are you using them for management tools and all of those things? And as you can see from this list, that there are a number of assessment tools that you can use. You can use things like document review. So why would you want to review documents? So depending on what your assessment calls for, you want to make sure that you have the correct paperwork in place to manage your programs. You want to have the correct forms in place to ensure that you're in compliance, right? You want to make sure you have the right documentation in place to show that you have a case for support, for example. You want to be able to have documents in place that will document processes and chart your processes, your programs and other activities. You want to have documents in place that show the history of the organization. So you want to review all of that. And some of the most important documents are, policies and procedures. Where are they strong? Where do they need tightening up? Where do they need updating? Another assessment tool is a board and staff retreat where people come together and talk about some of the issues that are most pressing for the organization. You want to look at surveys and questionnaires, and we have a number of surveys and questionnaires that our folks can use to assess leadership, to assess organizational capacity, to assess board capacity. Sometimes you want to be laser focused just on one thing. It could be technology, it could be human resources, it could be assessing your ability to start a new organization, it could be assessing your capability of starting a social enterprise, it could be looking at your capability to engage in a really comprehensive strategic planning process. You can use interviews, you can use focus groups. The interviews and focus groups give you that information that you can't necessarily gain from a survey. And using all of this stuff together, that helps you to come up with a complete picture. So here are some of the examples of capacity building activities. Things like strategic planning. As I said before, strategic planning is looking at your environment and positioning your organization to actually survive the changes and making sure that you maintain relevance, to the community and to your clients, and not only remain relevant but thrive, right? Looking at fundraising as a capacity building activity. What systems do you need to have in place? Do you have a case for support? Are you using technology to track your donors, to reach your donors? Things like that. Hiring and training staff, making sure that your staff is well trained and capable. If they need to have licenses to do the work, if there is some training that is not necessary, but it will help to set your staff apart in the marketplace, that's important as well. Other activities include IT planning and implementation, doing things like pre-qualifying for state and federal grants. One of those activities is registering on SAMS.gov, registering for GATA in the state of Illinois, grants.gov, automating your financial systems. Sometimes when we're starting out, we have everything on an Excel spreadsheet. We want to make sure that you go from Excel to a minimum of QuickBooks. Other things might be upgrading your financial policies, upgrading your financial controls to minimize risk of any fraud. Hiring a culture consultant to actually facilitate some of these activities, board development to make sure that your board has the tools that they need to guide your organization in the way that it should go. All right, so I'm going to leave you with this. What's next, right? We want you to try this at home. If you are a member of the Nonprofit Utopia community, we have tools in the community that you can access. We got copies of an organizational assessment. If you are watching, we have actually uploaded a link to that same organizational assessment that you can take for free. Our members, once they take that, they can actually schedule office hours where we could talk about it in more detail, help analyze those results. And then on Wednesday, we're actually going to take this a step further in a members only event where we show you how to take those assessment results and then chart your course, for future planning so that you can start off 2024 in a very strong position. You'll know what it is you need to do in order to position your organization for success over the long term. All right, so I am going to close out. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post and I will share those, with our audience, and I will also respond. If you are in the community, we can continue this conversation in the community. If you need to get in touch with me, you can email me at ValerieFLeonard@nonprofitutopia.com. And by all means, feel free to join us so that we can have this ongoing contact. All right. So if there are any comments, please feel free to share. If not, then I will end this live stream right now. And I thank you so much. Take care. Bye bye.